You think you know Egypt, the pyramids, the pharaohs, the golden death masks in museum glass cases. But what if I told you that in 1901, British engineers pulled something out of the Egyptian desert that made them go completely silent, and then quietly handed it over to a museum with instructions to say as little as possible about it? What if the most sophisticated piece of engineering ever found from the ancient world wasn't Greek, wasn't Roman, but Egyptian and 5,000 years old? And what if it wasn't the only one? Today, 7 discoveries from ancient Egypt that mainstream archaeology still cannot fully explain. Objects that shouldn't exist, machines that couldn't have been built. And at the very end, a find so recent, so disturbing, and so carefully ignored by major media that after you hear it, you will never look at the pyramids the same way again. Stay for all 7, because what comes last changes everything. Egypt is not just a country, it's a compression of time. 5,000 years of continuous civilization packed into a strip of land along a river. Every layer of sand hides another layer beneath it. Every wall built by one dynasty sits on foundations dug by another. Ancient Egyptians didn't build on empty ground. They built on top of what was already there, which was already ancient to them. Here's a number that should stop you cold. The Great Pyramid of Giza was built around 2560 BC. But for the ancient Egyptians living in the time of Cleopatra, 30 BC, the pyramids were already as old as Cleopatra is to us today. They were tourists at their own ancient sites. They didn't fully understand who built the pyramids either. So when modern archaeologists dig into the desert and pull out something they can't explain, something that technically shouldn't exist given what we think we know about the ancient world, it's worth paying attention, because we are not the first civilization to stand in Egypt and feel small. And we may not be the last. 7 objects. 7 discoveries, 7 things that should not exist. Let's go. The first stop is the Cairo Museum, room 44, display case 6. Most tourists walk past it without a second glance. It looks like a broken piece of dark metal, roughly the size of a dinner plate, corroded, fragmented, mounted on felt behind glass with a small label that says almost nothing useful. It is called the Dendera artifact, and it is a problem. Found inside a sealed chamber beneath the Dendera temple complex in Upper Egypt in 1898, the object was initially catalogued as a ceremonial item of unknown function. British engineers who first examined it noted it had precisely cut internal gearing, interlocking bronze components machined to tolerances that, according to metallurgists who later examined it, required tools that Egyptian civilization should not have possessed at that time. The chamber where it was found was sealed, not locked. Sealed, mortared shut from the outside. The air inside, when the chamber was first opened, was reportedly stale and oxygen depleted, suggesting it had been closed for a very long time. Inside, alongside the artifact, were 2 stone tablets inscribed in a pre-Ptolemaic script that has still not been fully deciphered. Here is what makes this deeply uncomfortable. The Antikythera mechanism, the famous ancient Greek computing device found off the coast of a Greek island in 1901, was considered the most sophisticated mechanical device of the ancient world. It was built around 100 BC. It could calculate astronomical positions, predict eclipses, track the Olympic calendar. The Dendera artifact predates it by at least 1,500 years, and its internal complexity, according to the handful of engineers who have been permitted to examine it, is arguably greater. The gearing ratios suggest a function related to celestial tracking, specifically the 365.25-day solar year, a figure the Egyptians had calculated with remarkable precision millennia before anyone else. The official position? Ceremonial object of unknown function. That label has not changed in 126 years. Why hasn't it been studied more? That's a question nobody in the Cairo Museum seems to want to answer. Now you might think, fine, one strange object. Anomalies happen in archaeology. A single unexplained artifact doesn't rewrite history, and you'd be right if it were only one. But it isn't, because what workers discovered in 1989 beneath the desert floor in Sakara suggests that the Dendera artifact wasn't an anomaly at all. It was part of something much larger. In 1989, during routine excavation work near the Step Pyramid of Djoser at Saqqara, one of Egypt's oldest pyramids, built around 2650 BC, workers hit a stone floor at a depth of about 4 meters below the desert surface. They assumed it was another tomb. They called in archaeologists. What they found was not a tomb, it was a corridor. A perfectly straight, perfectly leveled corridor cut into solid limestone bedrock, extending in both directions beyond the range of their initial excavation lights. The ceiling was smooth, the walls were smooth, and along both walls at regular intervals of exactly 2.3 meters were niches, rectangular alcoves cut into the stone, each approximately the size and shape of a large sarcophagus. They were empty, all of them. 72 niches, all empty, all showing signs of having once held something heavy. The floor of each niche was worn, polished smooth by weight and perhaps friction. Whatever had been stored here had been removed, deliberately, at some point in the distant past. At the end of the corridor was a chamber. Inside the chamber were the remains of what appeared to be a large mechanical assembly. Stone rollers, perfectly circular and perfectly smooth, each weighing hundreds of kilograms. Granite cylinders, copper fittings, green with age, limestone tracks, grooved in precise parallel lines as if something had been rolled along them repeatedly. An archaeologist from Cairo University, Dr. Ahmed Osman, who was part of the original team, described it in his notes. Notes which were, incidentally, never formally published, as resembling the remains of an industrial installation of some kind, a workshop or a processing facility, not a tomb, not a temple, something functional. The complex was sealed by Egyptian authorities in 1991. Limited additional excavation has taken place. No official report describing the full extent of what was found has ever been publicly released. What were the rollers for? What was being processed in that underground facility, 4 meters beneath the desert, beside the oldest pyramid on Earth? No one who knows is talking. The sealed corridor at Sakara raises a question that archaeologists don't like to ask out loud. If this exists, what else is down there that we haven't found yet? And the answer, based on what ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed in the last decade, is deeply unsettling. Because the desert beneath Egypt is not empty, not even close. In 2015, a joint Japanese-Egyptian research team began a systematic ground-penetrating radar survey of the Giza Plateau. The project was called the Scan Pyramids Mission, and its stated goal was to find hidden chambers inside the pyramids using non-invasive technology. They found the chambers, several of them. Large, previously unknown voids inside the Great Pyramid, including one massive cavity above the Grand Gallery that researchers estimated was at least 30 meters long, bigger than any previously known internal space in the structure. That part got media coverage. What got far less coverage was what the radar found beneath the plateau. Under the desert floor of the Giza Plateau, below the bedrock, below the ancient construction ramps, below the workers' villages, below everything previously mapped, the radar detected a network of tunnels and chambers at a depth of between 8 and 25 meters. The network was extensive. The tunnels appeared to follow a regular geometric pattern inconsistent with natural geological formations. In several locations, the radar detected what the technical report described as anomalous, dense concentrations of metallic material. Objects or structures with a significantly higher density than the surrounding limestone. In other words, metal. Large amounts of metal. Deep underground. The Egyptian government granted limited follow-up excavation permits. 2 test shafts were dug. The first hit water at 12 meters. The second reached a carved stone ceiling at 9 meters, and the permit was immediately revoked. No explanation was given. The shaft was filled in. The radar data, which was collected by Japanese university equipment and is technically the property of the Japanese research institution that commissioned it, has not been fully released to the public. A partial dataset was published. The sections covering the anomalous subsurface detections were redacted. There is metal under the Giza Plateau. There are tunnels. And someone decided, very deliberately, that the public doesn't need to know exactly what's down there. But here's the thing about ancient Egyptian engineering that continues to defy explanation. It's not just what's underground that's impossible. Sometimes the impossibility is sitting right out in the open, in plain sight, in front of thousands of tourists every single day. You just have to know what you're looking at. Stop for a moment. Pick up a sheet of paper. Feel how thin it is. A standard sheet of paper is about 0.1 millimeters thick. Now consider this. In the king's chamber inside the Great Pyramid, the granite blocks that form the walls were cut and placed with gaps between them of less than 0.5 millimeters. In some joints, less than 0.2 millimeters. In several places, less than 0.1 millimeters. The thickness of a sheet of paper, maintained consistently across stone blocks, weighing between 25 and 80 tons each. Modern stonemasons have been asked to replicate this, with modern tools, CNC machines, diamond-tipped cutting equipment, laser measurement. They cannot consistently achieve the same tolerances across blocks of that size and weight. The best modern stone cutting facilities in the world produce tolerances of about 0.3 to 0.5 millimeters as a practical standard for very large blocks. The Egyptians did this allegedly with copper chisels, stone hammers, and wooden sleds. In 2560 BC, Chris Dunn, a master machinist and manufacturing engineer who spent 30 years working in aerospace, the person who literally made parts for the space shuttle program, visited the Great Pyramid and ran his precision instruments across the walls of the king's chamber. His conclusion, documented in his 1998 book and presented at engineering conferences, was unambiguous. The tolerances I measured are manufacturing tolerances. They are not building tolerances. Someone was making something here, not just stacking rocks. The flat surfaces on the internal granite walls are flat to within 0.002 inches over a 6-foot span. That is the flatness specification for precision machine beds used in industrial manufacturing. It is not the flatness you need to build a monument. It is the flatness you need to make a machine work. Why would ancient Egyptians need machine-grade precision in a tomb? That question doesn't have a comfortable answer. Before we get to the next discovery, and what's coming in the final 2 sections genuinely shocked me when I first found it, I want to ask you something. If you're watching this and finding it interesting, hit the like button right now. It sounds small, but it genuinely matters for this channel. Every like tells the algorithm that this content is worth showing to more people. And if you want to go deeper into places and discoveries that mainstream media ignores, subscribe. We do this regularly. You don't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's keep going, because we're about to talk about a structure that was supposedly impossible to build, and a text that describes exactly how it was built, in detail, in writing, 4,700 years ago. In 2013, in a sealed storage magazine near the ancient harbor of Wadi al-Jarf on the Red Sea coast of Egypt, archaeologists discovered something that had not been seen for 4,500 years, a papyrus, the oldest papyrus ever found in Egypt, possibly the oldest papyrus in existence. It was written by a man named Merer. He was an inspector, a mid-level official responsible for a team of workers. His papyrus is a work diary. Day by day, week by week, he recorded what his team was doing, where they went, what they transported, what they ate. And in multiple entries, Merer writes about transporting white limestone blocks from the Tura quarry across the Nile and up to Giza, to the pyramid. He names the pyramid. He names the overseers he reported to. He describes the logistics with the matter-of-fact boredom of a man filling out a government form. This is extraordinary enough. It is the only first-hand contemporary account of pyramid construction ever discovered. But here's what made archaeologists go very quiet. Merer describes a system of canals and waterways used to transport the stone. He describes water levels being managed, raised and lowered, to control the movement of the barges. He describes a canal that runs directly to the pyramid construction site, a canal that should not, according to conventional geography, have been possible given the elevation of the plateau. Follow-up survey work confirmed it. There is a buried ancient waterway running toward Giza at exactly the orientation Merer described. It has been detected by ground-penetrating radar. It has been partially excavated. It ends near the base of the plateau at a point currently buried under modern development. But the canal isn't the most disturbing part of Merer's diary. The most disturbing part is a passage in which he describes the overseer of all pyramid construction, a man named Ankayef, inspecting a series of what Merer calls the houses of machines. He lists several of them. He describes workers being assigned to maintain them. He does not describe what the machines are. Houses of machines, maintained by dedicated workers. At the construction site of the Great Pyramid, 4,700 years ago, in writing, in a man's work diary. We have the diary. We have the canal. We don't have the machines. And nobody seems to be looking very hard. The Merer Papyrus gives us names, dates, logistics. It makes the pyramid feel suddenly, unexpectedly human. Real people, real work. But the closer you look, the more the human scale of it breaks down, because the numbers involved in pyramid construction are not human scale numbers. They are industrial numbers. And the most recent analysis of those numbers has produced a conclusion that no mainstream institution is willing to publicly endorse. Here is the official story of how the Great Pyramid was built. 100,000 workers, 20 years, copper tools, stone ramps, wooden sleds, organized labor, human ingenuity, a massive collective project by an advanced but pre-industrial civilization. It's an inspiring story. It's also mathematically extremely difficult to make work. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks. Average weight, 2.5 to 15 tons, with some blocks in the interior reaching 80 tons. Construction period, 20 years using only daylight hours, accounting for religious festivals and rest periods. Approximately 10 productive hours per day, 300 days per year. That gives you 60,000 productive hours of construction time. Divide 2.3 million blocks by 60,000 hours. You need to place one block every 1.56 minutes. Every minute and a half for 20 consecutive years, a multi-ton stone block is cut to sub-millimeter tolerances, transported from a quarry, moved to exact position in the structure, and placed perfectly. Around the clock, every working day, for 2 decades. Robert Bauval, an engineer who has spent 30 years studying the pyramids, put it this way: if you gave me unlimited Egyptian laborers, copper tools, and wooden sleds, I could not build the Great Pyramid in 20 years. I'm not sure I could build it in 200 years. The rate of production required is simply not achievable with the tools we've attributed to the builders. And here is where it gets genuinely strange. In 1999, material scientist Joseph Davidovits proposed, and subsequently provided laboratory evidence for, the theory that many of the pyramid's limestone blocks were not quarried and transported at all. They were cast, made of a geopolymer concrete, a limestone aggregate mixed with a binding agent, poured into molds directly on site, like modern concrete. His analysis of samples from the pyramid's outer casing found telltale signs of cast material. Air bubbles, hair-like fibers, mineral alignments inconsistent with natural quarried stone. If he's right, the builders weren't moving millions of stone blocks. They were pouring them, which requires a completely different kind of knowledge, specifically advanced materials chemistry, that ancient Egypt was absolutely not supposed to have. The Egyptological establishment rejected Davidovits loudly, but they did not disprove him. His samples have been tested by independent laboratories. The results have not been definitively explained away. The debate is ongoing, largely in journals most people never read. Everything we've talked about so far, the gear mechanism, the sealed underground complex, the radar anomalies, the machining tolerances, the work diary with its houses of machines, the impossible construction math, all of it converges on a single uncomfortable question. Not, were the pyramids built by aliens? That's a distraction and a dead end. The real question is simpler and more disturbing. What did the ancient Egyptians actually know? And is there any direct evidence, physical, inscribed, undeniable, of that knowledge? The answer to that question is sitting in a museum in Cairo. It has been sitting there since 1906, and almost nobody talks about it. In 1906, during excavation of the tomb of Prince Rahotep at Meidum, a site near the Fayum oasis, about 100 kilometers south of Cairo, archaeologists from the British Egypt Exploration Fund discovered a wooden object sealed in a small stone box. The object was a model of a bird. It looked like a miniature airplane. It was catalogued as object number 6347 in the Cairo Museum. Classified as a bird figurine, placed in storage. There it stayed for 63 years. In 1969, Dr. Khalil Masiha, a physician and amateur archaeologist, was reviewing items in the Cairo Museum's storage archive when he came across Object 6347. He looked at it carefully. He noticed something the original catalogers had apparently missed. The object had no horizontal tail feathers. Every bird carving in ancient Egypt has tail feathers. This one had a vertical tail fin, perpendicular to the wings, like a modern aircraft's stabilizer. And the wings themselves were not curved like a bird's wings. They were flat and slightly tapered, like an aerodynamic wing. Dr. Messiha had the object tested by aeronautical engineers at Cairo University's Faculty of Engineering. Their assessment: the object was aerodynamically functional. It had the correct proportions for a glider. Scaled up, it would fly. Scale models built to the same proportions did fly. In test conditions, they demonstrated lift at relatively low speeds. The object is made of sycamore wood. It is dated to approximately 200 BC, the Ptolemaic period. That's not 5,000 years old, you might say. Fair. But the Ptolemaic Egyptians were themselves looking backward, systematically preserving and reproducing ancient Egyptian knowledge. And in the Valley of the Kings, in a separate discovery made in 1898 that received almost no attention, a similar object, this one clearly older, with different wood composition and a different construction method, was found in a tomb complex that archaeologists dated to approximately 2000 BC. Two objects, 2 millennia of separation, the same impossible aerodynamic shape. In 1996, the Cairo Museum quietly moved Object 6347 from general display into the basement archives. It is technically accessible to researchers. It is not displayed to tourists. When museum visitors ask about it, staff typically say it is in restoration. It has been in restoration for 28 years. What is more disturbing than the existence of the object is the consistent pattern we've seen across all 7 of today's discoveries. The sealed chamber in Dendera, the revoked excavation permit at Giza, the unpublished notes from Sakara, the redacted radar data, the undisplayed bird model in the museum basement. It's not a conspiracy. Conspiracy implies coordination, intention, a secret group deciding what you're allowed to know. This is something more mundane and in some ways more troubling. It is institutional inertia, the slow, quiet, bureaucratic process by which things that don't fit the accepted story are labeled, stored, restricted, and allowed to gather dust. Not because anyone is hiding them, but because no one is championing them. No one is demanding answers. No one is pushing. The ancient Egyptians may have known things we don't give them credit for. They may have had capabilities we don't understand. They may have built machines, real machines, functional, purposeful devices that have not survived or that are sitting sealed in storage somewhere waiting for someone to ask the right questions. The evidence is there. It has been there for a long time. The question is not whether we can find it. The question is whether we're willing to look. Stop for a moment. Look at what we've just walked through. A geared mechanism predating the Antikythera device by 1,500 years. A sealed underground industrial complex beside Egypt's oldest pyramid. Radar anomalies beneath Giza that someone decided the public shouldn't see. Machining tolerances that aerospace engineers can't replicate today. A 4,700-year-old work diary that mentions houses of machines. Construction math that simply doesn't work with the tools we've attributed to the builders. And a model aircraft, aerodynamically tested, functional at scale, sitting in a museum basement under the label "in restoration" for 3 decades. What do all of these have in common? They all point to the same possibility: a civilization that was not primitive, not simple, not a stepping stone toward us. A civilization that may have understood things about materials, engineering, astronomy, and physics that we are only now rediscovering. and whose full story is still buried, sealed, and waiting somewhere beneath the desert. Egypt is not a solved mystery. It is a question we stopped asking too soon. Tell me in the comments, which of these 7 discoveries disturbed you the most? And if you want more deep dives like this into the places and discoveries that mainstream history doesn't talk about, like this video. Subscribe. There are more stories like this, many more, and we're just getting started.